What is ADHD and how do you know if you have it? Is it difficult for you to pay attention? Then you need to listen to this podcast. Welcome to...
Oh, sorry, we're talking to me. Oh, sorry. Welcome to Aprender Inglés con Rez y Craig.
Pay attention, Reza. With over 45 years of teaching English between us, Reza and I are going to help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm very well, Craig. I was fooling with you listeners. I was paying attention. I deliberately did it because it's the topic of our podcast. How are you, Craig?
Yep, I'm very well, thank you. And today we're talking about paying attention and attention disorders. But before that, Reza, do you remember Pilar Martinez, who lives in France?
I certainly do. I got a really nice email from her. And besides, how can you forget someone who's brave enough to learn English in France? She deserves a medal.
Well, we've received another voice message from Pilar, so here she is.
Hi, I'm Pilar from France. First of all, thank you very much for your time. You help us a lot. I listen to the new podcast every week, but I'm also listening to all your podcasts from the first one every day. Yesterday, I listened to podcast number 93, I think, where Alfredo talked about his Italian accent. I would like to share my experience because I've always been very shy to speak English because of my accent, but now I don't care anymore because I realized that English speakers would understand me, which I think is the most important. Anyway, the accent never goes away. I've been living in France for 16 years now. I speak French correctly, but the accent is still there. I don't like my accent, but it's still there. So I found the courage to send you this message. It's the first one, and I am a little nervous. Now I only have to improve my pronunciation and grammar. Well, I think it's everything. Thanks again. You are really the best English teacher I ever met. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Well, I don't know about you, Reza, but I thought Pilar's accent was absolutely incredible. I think it's very attractive because it has that French, there's a French influence in her accent, but it's not too strong to interfere with communication. I found her accent very, very nice to listen to. What did you think?
Yes, you have a very pleasant accent, but apart from pleasant, very nice, it's extremely easy to understand. There was nothing there at all that I couldn't understand, Pilar, very, very easily. So your accent's very good. And your pronunciation as well, they're not quite the same thing. One thing is to have an accent, you sound French, you sound Indian, you sound Irish, you sound Australian. Another thing is pronunciation. Your pronunciation was fantastic. Mm-hmm. Very good. You get your vowels and your consonant sounds correct.
And I really liked some of the vocabulary you used. You mentioned about being shy, and shyness can be a problem when you're recording your voice and you're sending voice messages or even speaking to or with native speakers. But you found the courage, and I really like that expression, to find the courage to do something. So congratulations. And keep sending us messages because personally, I really enjoy listening to your accent.
There was just one thing you said. Maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe you said it on purpose. I'm not sure. You said, thanks very much for saying that we were the best teachers that you ever met. Thanks very much. But technically, that's not true because you've never met us in person, although we'd love to meet you someday. But you have met us online, I guess. I'm just wondering if you confused meet and know. It's possible because in Spanish, it happens to be the same word, conocer. Mm-hmm. So you've never actually met us in person. But yes, you know us because of the stuff we do on our podcast. So maybe you meant to say, I don't know, Pilar, maybe it was like a joke, or I don't know, but maybe you meant to say we're the best teachers that you've ever known, perhaps.
When did we meet? I met you in 1998.
Right.
So how long have we known each other?
20 years.
20 years.
Wow. A long
So
time.
the amount of time that you know someone is the time that has passed between meeting them for the first time, nice to meet you, up until now. So we met, past simple, in 1998. We've known each other for 20 years. Both of those conocer, as Reza said.
Craig, I think we have another voice message. This time, nowhere near France. We have to go all the way to Argentina to hear this from Natalia.
Hi Reza, hi Craig, I'm Natalia from Argentina. I just wanted to thank you for your amazing podcast. I discovered you 2 months ago, and well, now I can't stop listening to you. I just wanted to ask you for a piece of advice. As I have to renew my English certificates of my English level, I'm not sure whether to sit for the CAE, for the advanced, or for the proficiency. And my question is there a big difference between these two certificates? Which one should I do? Well, thanks again for all your help, and bye for now.
Speaking of wonderful pronunciation, Reza, what did you think of Natalia's message?
Well, just like Pilar, very good pronunciation, and well done for being brave and sending us, everyone who sends us a message on SpeakPipe. Thanks very much. You see, you sound great. Don't be embarrassed. Just go and do it. Pilar and Natalia sound great. Can understand them, no problem.
Absolutely. And as far as I know, Reza, let's see if you agree, you don't have to renew your Cambridge certificate. So if you've taken one of those exams in the past, CAE or CPE, they don't expire. It's not like IELTS that there's a time limit on the certificate. So if you already have it, it's not necessary to take it again.
Yes and no. That's quite right. They are valid for life. However, it depends what you're going to use it for, Natalia. These days, foreigners applying to study in British universities very often use as proof of their level of English an advanced exam, CAE, or proficiency, CPE. But very often, universities insist that you pass the exam in the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
So it's not that your exam isn't valid if you passed it 10 or 20 years ago. It is. It's just that certain institutions won't accept it as good enough proof. Mm-hmm. So it depends what you're using it for. But yes, it is valid forever. It is valid forever if you do a Cambridge exam.
And let me give you, Natalia, some reference for further information. If you go to our podcast number 24, we spoke about these certificates in detail, the FCE, CAE, and CPE proficiency. And you go to inglespodcast.com/24 for that information. Also, you can do practice tests online at a website that has very good exams for C1 and C2, and it's called examenglish.com. So the links, los enlaces, the links for those two practice tests are in our show notes at inglespodcast.com/197 for this episode. And finally, your spoken English, Natalia, to me, and I think to Reza, does sound like proficiency level. However, I suggest you go and do a level test, and you can find the right exam for you on the Cambridge English website. So again, the link is in the show notes for this episode. Do the test, do the level test, and that will orientate you, that will direct you to the correct exam for your current level of vocabulary and grammar. That's cambridgeenglish.org. Test your English, and there's a link in the show notes.
One more thing, Natalia, I really liked the nice collocation you used. You asked us for a piece of advice. Well done. piece of advice. You cannot say plus advice because advice is uncountable. And you correctly asked us for a piece of advice. And we hope our piece of advice has been useful for you.
Speaking of making mistakes, which Natalia did not do, but I did, thanks to Angelica Bello, who is kindly transcribing the episodes for you over at patreon.com. She corrected a mistake I made recently. I said to sharpen a pencil, this was the podcast about stationery, to sharpen a pencil is sacar punta al lápiz in Spanish, not sacar punto, which is what I said. And Angelica said, sacar punto sounds like a knitting class. Knitting is hacer punto. So absolutely right. Thank you, Angelica, for your correction. And mistakes are great. Mistakes are wonderful because if you don't make mistakes, you cannot learn. So don't be afraid of mistakes. Keep practicing your English and keep improving it.
You know, Angelica, I was going to make a joke about this, but I've decided no. I thought, what's the point?
What's the point? Oh,
sorry. What's the point?
Moving on, I think, to our next piece of feedback, which comes from Ronnie, Veronica Morfin, who is definitely now, I think, an AIRC-aholic. Now, if you're a new listener to the podcast, an AIRC-aholic, AIRC-aholic, is a big fan of the podcast, AIRC, Aprender Inglés con Rezi Craig, and I think Veronica is now a confirmed and official AIRC-aholic. She would like to suggest a topic. Reza, what topic does Ronnie suggest for this episode?
A very interesting topic. She wants to talk about ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder.
But before we speak about that, let's look at some vocabulary that will help us understand the definition and talk about exactly what ADD or ADHD actually is. So we mentioned before to pay attention. What does that mean, Reza, to pay attention? We've spoken about this before.
Well, you pay attention to something or to somebody, and it just means to focus on what a person is saying or what's happening, rather than to be distracted.
So to pay attention to and to focus attention on something. Enfocar, to focus, like you'd focus a camera, you'd focus a lens. You can focus your attention on something or on somebody. So people who cannot focus their attention or cannot pay attention for a long time may have ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Notice the prepositions Craig used: to pay attention to, but to focus attention on. And another expression is to draw somebody's attention to something. Now, that's not quite the same as to pay attention. If I pay attention to Craig, that means I'm listening to Craig. But if I draw Craig's attention to these new shoes that I bought, I want Craig to pay attention to my shoes. So you draw somebody else's, another person's attention to something. Like a teacher might draw your attention to something that he's trying to explain, which is difficult to understand. Or I want Craig to look at my new shoes, so I draw his attention to them.
You can also distract someone's attention from something. There's a different preposition, distract from. The noun of distract is distraction. So if there are lots of distractions around you, then maybe your attention is distracted. When I work, I find it impossible to listen to music. Any kind of music distracts me from focusing on the task. So music for me is a big distraction when I'm trying to concentrate.
A similar word to attention is concentration. So you concentrate, the verb, you concentrate on something, concentrate on your homework, concentrate on cooking the dinner. Don't get distracted. Don't lose concentration. To be distracted is to lose concentration.
And a very common collocation for speaking about attention is someone's attention span, S-P-A-N. Attention span, that's the duration of attention. In the same way that a bridge spans a river, your attention spans a period. So attention span in Spanish, I think, is periodo de concentración, What's the attention span of an adult, for example? What's the attention span of a child? Has our attention span changed over the last few years? We'll be speaking about that later. So your attention span, the duration of your attention on one particular thing.
Craig, earlier you mentioned the initials ADHD. What are they about? What does that mean?
Well, let me read a definition from Wikipedia which speaks about ADHD, and the letters represent attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's a mental disorder of the neurodevelopmental type. Wow, I don't know what neurodevelopmental type really is. Neuro's the brain, isn't it? Develop, to develop, desarrollar, and it's neurodevelopmental as the adjective. So it's characterized by problems in paying attention, excessive of activity, or difficulty controlling behavior, which is not appropriate for a person's age. The symptoms appear before a person is 12 years old, are present for more than 6 months, and cause problems in at least 2 settings or 2 situations, such as at school, at home, recreational activities, maybe sports. In children, problems paying attention may result in poor school performance. So if your child has problems concentrating and focusing on a task, that may result in their performance and their marks in tests, etc. at school. Although it causes impairment in Spanish is discapacidad, particularly in modern society, many children with ADHD have a good attention span for tasks they find interesting. That's from Wikipedia. Actually, I would say that's the same with adults. I think also, for me, if I'm interested in something, I pay attention. If I'm not interested, then my attention wanders. To wander is to go away in a different direction. Do you find that? It's true for children and adults, right?
I think it's true for everybody. Things that interest you, you find easier to concentrate on. There's no shocking revelation there. I think we all know that.
So what are the symptoms of ADHD?
Good question, Craig. But first, let me point out that we are not doctors, obviously. So if you are worried that you might suffer from ADHD and you're not sure, obviously you should get professional medical advice. We're just talking about useful English on the subject of ADHD, but we can't really give you advice about how to medically treat yourself.
Yeah, so that's our disclaimer. We take no responsibility for these symptoms. We're just speaking about it to try and improve your English. So what are the symptoms of ADHD? How does someone know if their child has it or if their partner has it?
From what I understand, the most obvious symptom is that you're easily distracted. You find it hard to concentrate on things. In other words, you're restless. You're restless. You can't just be calm and rest. No, you think about one thing for a few seconds, then another, and then that bores you, then another, or you decide you don't want to think about anything. Restlessness.
And maybe people who find it difficult to focus and concentrate on one task. We speak about multitasking, doing more than one thing at the same time. But if you can't concentrate on one task, that could also be a symptom. For example, you're watching the television and then you pick up your mobile phone to look on your mobile phone, then you go back to the television and you're doing something else at the same time.
Oh, Craig, this is a bit worrying. It could be that you've just described all teenagers at this moment in time up to the age of 18. Do they all have ADHD? I don't know. Okay, moving on. You also might find it difficult to sit still. In other words, you fidget. There's a good word. F-I-D-G-E-T, to fidget. That means you're always moving around. You don't seem to be comfortable. You move in your chair. You're physically restless. And you might run around at the wrong times. Whenever it would be a good time to sit down and be still, you're moving about or running around. That's another symptom.
I remember when I was younger, my parents would say to me at the dinner table, Craig, stop fidgeting and sit still. Sit still and eat your dinner or eat your lunch. Stop fidgeting in your chair, because I think children do tend to move around and fidget a lot, especially at the table.
Another thing is that people with ADHD seem not to listen when you speak to them directly.
Mm-hmm.
That's another symptom which is quite easy to identify.
And they can be very impulsive. They act before thinking, so they won't think before they do something. They'll just do it immediately as an impulse.
Also, a symptom is to make careless mistakes, things which should be obvious that you shouldn't do or shouldn't forget to do. People with ADHD often make that mistake.
And for adults, well, adults with ADHD could be quite messy. Mess is un lío. So they could be messy in their office, in their house, and very disorganized. And they might have poor time management, which means that they fail to meet deadlines. Deadlines are fecha tope. So they might not deliver work on time. They might not manage their time very well. They might lose things easily. Where are my keys? Where's my notebook? Where are my pens? They might be forgetful in daily activities. And when they're running chores or doing chores are tareas, paying bills on time, keeping appointments, all of these things could indicate ADHD.
Another thing which could be a sign of ADHD is difficulty waiting in a line. But that could be a sign that you're Spanish as well. I don't know.
You think Spanish people have a problem queuing up?
Yeah. We've talked about this in previous episodes. Not all Spanish people, but certainly a lot of Spanish people I've seen are not very enthusiastic about queuing. Do they have ADHD? I don't know. They might.
Maybe, maybe not.
I'm curious to know if Craig edits this out or not. I'll be listening to the episode online.
Also, people who talk a lot and interrupt other people.
Oh, I have ADHD. Okay.
But
I thought I did.
But you don't interrupt people.
I try not to.
So that's a description of some characteristics that might indicate ADHD. Have you ever had, Reza, or maybe suspected one of your students with ADHD? Because you tend to teach more younger students than I do. You've taught children quite often in the past. Do you remember any?
I've never had any extreme case, but one or two people that I thought might have ADHD. Actually, the worst case was an adult. I did have an adult.
What characteristics of that student made you think or suspect that they had ADHD?
Well, she was very restless. She wouldn't pay attention, I thought, to very important points that she should have paid attention to, and then she didn't understand them. And then she'd become really obsessed with completely trivial things which were of no use. Check her phone 20 times in the class for no reason. That type of thing.
Do you think technology is to blame for making our attention span shorter?
I think it partly is. But it doesn't affect everyone equally. But I think some people have been affected by the prevalent use of technology because everybody knows how things like WhatsApp works and Facebook and all the rest of it. You can't get too deep. Or Twitter. Twitter's incredible. How many characters is it? 25 words? Or
used to be 140, now it's 280.
280 characters? Characters, which includes spaces and punctuation. You can't get deep with that. You can be effective, sure, it has its uses, but you can't be deep and analytical. Time to move on. After the characters are done, next topic, that's it. And maybe that does add to it. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. And maybe another thing that could make us more restless and less concentrated, social media like Facebook and LinkedIn and other social media applications have notifications. So when there's a new message, WhatsApp as well, when you have a new message, there's a red number that tells you you've got messages. So people are constantly checking and moving from one app to another app to check their recent messages, which means you're not focusing on one thing for a long time. Maybe that has an effect. And of course, video as well. We're watching more video these days. Video killed the radio star. Remember that song back in the 80s when we started watching videos with MTV? Since then, it's just got more and more developed. So video is a huge time suck, and it takes us to watch a lot of videos on the internet.
There's a thing to do with attention span which really blows my mind. When you go to a concert, particularly classical music, because you suppose that, you pay a lot of attention to everything and it's very important that you don't miss anything. But it could be the same for rock as well, but particularly classical music, people at a concert, and they're checking the phone. Why did they bother to go to the concert?
Exactly.
You could have listened to it at home and interrupt the record or CD or the thing that you got recorded on your laptop or your phone at any time. If you're going to go to live music, I say turn off your phone, relax and enjoy it. Enjoy it.
Be in the moment.
Yeah, unless there's some potential emergency that might happen or you're a doctor on call, turn off your phone. You see, that for me is a classic sign of lack of attention span. The symphony's going to last 30 minutes or something. Oh, goodness me, I can't put my phone away for 30 minutes, some people think. I think you can.
I agree. And speaking of attention span, when we teach English, we tend to teach lessons that last for 40 minutes, 45 minutes? Because I think people who work in education have pretty much decided that after that time without a break, it's difficult to stay focused and concentrated. What do you think is the average attention span of an adult these days?
Really, will you get useful learning done? I think, but 40 minutes is the tops. 40, 45. Even half an hour, it's not looking too good. What do you think?
Well, this might surprise you. Microsoft did a survey in Canada of the way people in Canada consume media. Now, this was in 2016, 2 years ago, and they discovered during this survey the attention span of an adult has dropped from 12 seconds in the year 2000 to 8 seconds in 2016. So in 16 years, adult attention span dropped by 4 seconds, which is shorter than a goldfish.
Wow, that's really surprising.
It is, isn't it?
A question of seconds, not minutes, seconds.
Now, I suspected that because when you create video on the internet, in many experts' opinion, when you watch a video on YouTube, for example, you have to get somebody's attention in the first 6 seconds. If you don't get their attention in 6 or 8 seconds, they go somewhere else. So you must start a video and engage the listener quickly. Otherwise, they disappear. They go away.
Craig, tell me, do you listen to the radio in the car when you're driving?
I tend to listen to podcasts. And if you think about it, Reza, when cars were invented, it was fantastic entertainment. You sat in a car and you drove it. It was amazing. You were totally enjoying the experience and you weren't distracted. But with time, when you traveled on long journeys in a car, you got bored. What did they do? They put radios in cars. So I think that's a really important point in technological history of distraction when you're doing another activity.
Yes, I take your point. Mind you means, on the other hand, I see an advantage to radios as regards improving your attention span. Sometimes it can distract you, but if you're feeling a bit sleepy and you're getting a bit distracted because you're tired, sometimes it's a good idea to put the radio on to wake yourself up. So it can work either way, I think.
Okay, but staying with cars, let me ask you this question. What's your opinion on video screens in the back of the car, on the back seat, on the back of the seat of the driver and passenger, so that children in the back can watch a video while their parents are driving?
I don't see any harm in that. I wouldn't be keen. I wouldn't be enthusiastic about my kids doing it all the time. But from time to time, I don't see much harm because, kids get bored quickly and they're not driving. Yeah. But absolutely, definitely not for the driver. It shouldn't be, the screen shouldn't be positioned so that the driver can even see it, because the temptation would be great to watch it. Do you agree?
I do agree, yeah. But there is something quite disturbing about trying to keep your children quiet by putting on a video in the back of the car. Perhaps they might be playing a game. They should be playing a game together, or one of the parents should be talking to them or entertaining them. Or when I was young, we used to play I Spy out of the window. I Spy with my little eye. And you'd find something and interact with the children, and you'd have a conversation in the family rather than getting the child to focus on a TV screen in the back of the car. I don't know. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. But speaking of ADHD and education, there's a very good TED Talk on YouTube by Sir Ken Robinson, who is a person who's promoting change in education. And I don't know if you've heard of Gillian Lynn. He tells a story of Gillian Lynn, who is a choreographer, and she's been involved in theatre and musicals like Cats and Phantom of the Opera. But when Gillian Lynn was 8 years old, she had a lot of problems at school. And her parents decided to take her to a psychiatrist or psychologist, and they sat there with the girl and the parents, and the psychologist said to the girl, who was sitting on her hands and trying not to move, just stay there, I'm going outside to speak to your parents. And when they went outside, he turned the radio on in the room, and as soon as they got to the door, the girl got up and started dancing and moving. And the psychiatrist said to the parents, your daughter Gillian doesn't have an attention problem, she's a dancer. So some people just need to move. And I think one problem today, I agree with Sir Ken, he's saying that we need to change education, because not everybody who's fidgeting and moving in their chair can't pay attention. Maybe they just need to dance, or they need to do something creative, or they're very sporty and they need to release the energy. What do you think?
Yep, I think you're totally right. And Sir Ken Robinson is quite right. We need to change the way we look at education quite radically.
I definitely recommend you go and watch that video. It's a wonderful presentation, and there's a link to it in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/197.
Now, Craig, we've been talking about a specific condition, ADHD, which is very, very common, it seems, these days compared to the past. But some people have suggested, I'm playing devil's advocate.
What does that mean?
That means that I'm giving the controversial or the bad or the problematic news, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I think it. But maybe not all people who appear to have or claim, that's affirmar, to have ADHD actually have it. Perhaps some people, not all, are just rude, antisocial, or too self-centered. What do you think? Because we've suggested that they might be apparent antisocial or selfish or impolite behavior, might be a sign of ADHD, but it might not be. It might just mean you're rude, antisocial, and self-centered. What do you think?
It could be. It could be that reason. Or as I said before, it could be that the child is just, or the person is just bored. And you get this label, you get this tag attached to you of ADHD, when maybe you're just not a person who can sit still. Maybe you just need to move, you need to be active, and that doesn't necessarily mean you need drugs or medication to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. But more and more people, from what we hear in the media, seem to be being affected by ADHD as time goes by. Do you think it was underdiagnosed? That means doctors didn't identify it in the past? Or do you think it's overdiagnosed now? Do you think they're diagnosing it too much and really not so many people have it?
That could be possible. I don't feel I have the knowledge to really comment on that. I haven't looked at medical studies, but definitely back in maybe before the 80s, it wasn't a recognized condition. people didn't know, like dyslexia, people didn't know you could have that disease. It wasn't an available condition in those days because we just didn't know. And maybe now that we do know, maybe it's being overdiagnosed because we realize that people can have this condition.
You're right.
What do you think?
In fact, yeah, I looked into it. I investigated it a bit and I found out that it was exactly 1980 and not before when the term ADD became officially accepted. ADD. And then ADHD didn't come out until 1987. So I wondered what they called it before that and how they dealt with such behavior. Maybe they just thought it was a lack of discipline, or they thought the child was just bad if it was a child. And if it was an adult, they probably thought it was just a bad person.
Yeah, I think children, they believed they were bad students. They were not disciplined, and maybe they just gave them drugs, and they just gave them drugs to calm them down and sedate them, and just make them move less. It's very similar in a way to people with dyslexia, because in the past it was thought that you just were not clever. If you couldn't read or write properly, you had a problem. It was your fault. But now we realize that dyslexia is a condition and it doesn't affect intelligence. It's just the way you organize the letters on a page.
Well, we've just scratched the surface. That means we haven't gone into great depth because we're not doctors, but we hope that our talk has helped you learn a bit more about how to talk about paying attention in English.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Veronica, for suggesting the topic. As you say, we live in a busy world where we have to do many things and we do get distracted easily. So maybe it's an idea to turn off your tablets, your phones, your TV screens an hour before you go to bed and just sit there in the dark and meditate for half an hour.
But never turn off our podcast. No, that you must keep on all the time.
And speaking of our podcast, we are getting very close to episode 200, and we would like to celebrate that with you. So we only have 3 more episodes before episode 200. If you have a question for us about anything, please send it to us and we will answer it in episode 200.
If you want to get in touch with us, as we said earlier, you can send us a voice message. Be brave. Go ahead. Do it. Just let us know what you think. Send it to speakpipe.com/English podcast.
Don't be shy. Send us a message. Ask us anything. Ask us any question you like, and we will include it in episode 200. If you prefer email, you can reach me at craig@inglespodcast.com.
Or me at belfastreza@gmail.com.
And before we go, a quick thank you to our wonderful patrons on Patreon, starting with Bruno, our gold sponsor, at CopenhagenWalkingTour.com, where you can find wonderful walking tours of that beautiful city, Copenhagen, in English or in Spanish. CopenhagenWalkingTour.com. If you happen to be going to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, Bruno also has the Favela Walking Tour, which is led by local guides only, which means it's safe and it helps to put back funds and money and develop the community to improve the local community in the favela. And for that walking tour, go to favelawalkingtour.com.br.
And thanks to all our Patreon sponsors, whose name you can read in the show notes if you have a look at them. They are Beatriz, Pedro, Maite, Rafa, Nestor, Sara, Jarabo, Carlos, Mamen, Juan, Cory Finnerin, Mirin, José Luis, Agos, Mariel, Manuel, García, Rafael, Manuel Tarazona, Juan Carlos, Pilar Martínez, Gambate Blog, Ana Giovanna, Igor, Ignacio, Kieran, Carlos, Pachi, Anna, and our latest patrons, Dana Constantine and Marina Ortiz Pena. Thank you to all of you.
Yes, thank you very much for your continued support. If you would like to join our Patreon program for as little as $1 per month, you get instant access to recent transcriptions that have been lovingly translated by Angelica Bello from Madrid, and you can join our Patreon program at patreon.com/Ingles podcast. Also, thank you to Patricia Alonso who continues working hard to transcribe episodes for you for free. And we now have episodes 1 to 18 transcribed and also 131 to 142.
Yes, so there'll be more transcriptions coming out from Angelica as time goes on. She's sitting, waiting with her pencil sharpened, ready to transcribe.
What's next week, Reza?
On next week's episode, the impersonal passive.
Until then, it's goodbye from Reza.
And goodbye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.
Attention. What was it? I can't remember. Oh, yeah. Attention. I'm joking again. Attention deficient order. Sorry. No. You see? I've got it. I can't do it.
Did you do that? Is that on purpose?
I know. I'll try it again. She wants us to talk about attention deficit. Why am I mispronouncing it? Because
Deficit.
I can't. I'll try to pay attention and get it right.